Welcome to tonight's panel discussion. It's called Choosing a Plant-Based Diet, Taking Climate Action Through the Food We Eat. We're very pleased to present this panel discussion as part of Yarra City Council and Yarra Library's work to support our community to take action on the climate emergency. My name is Sam. I'm the Climate Emergency Officer at the City of Yarra. And just before we get started tonight, we're going to run through a couple of little bits of housekeeping. And from there, I'm going to introduce you to one of our counsellors, our moderator, and of course, our special guests. So tonight, I'd like to ask all of you to keep your microphones on mute, please. And that's just so we can avoid lots of background noise. We're recording the session, and it's always makes better listening the second time around if there's not too many noisy things in the background. Please keep your cameras off again as the session is being recorded. And then in terms of questions for our guest speakers, Shannon Martinez from Smith & Daughters and Gemma Plesman from the Wilderness Society, any questions for the speakers, please pop them in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. There will be opportunities for us to put questions to the panelists later in the evening. So any questions in the Q&A function, but if you've got any interesting links to share or things that you'd like to comment on, you can do that in the chat function as well. So the Q&A function for questions to the panelists and the chat function for just general chit chat between us all. I'd like to introduce Counsellor Sophie Wade. So Counsellor Wade is one of our new councillors to Yarra City Council, recently elected in the last council elections, which I think was towards the end of last year. So Sophie's lived in and around Yarra all of her life and now lives in Collingwood, which is right in the thick of things, and loves being part of a really vibrant and bustling Smith Street precinct. So prior to her election, Sophie worked as a competition and consumer lawyer at a large international firm, mainly with regulators. But now while she's working as a local councillor, she does lots of pro bono work for Refugee Legal in Collingwood. So Sophie cares about inequality, participation in democracy, making the world greener and fairer, and taking action on climate change. So that makes her the perfect councillor to come along and welcome you to tonight's panel discussion. With that, I'd like to pass over to Councillor Wade to offer the Acknowledgement of Country, introduce our speakers and get the ball rolling. Thank you.
Hi everybody, and thanks Sam. Yarra City Council acknowledges the Wurundjeri Wurrung people as the traditional owners and true sovereigns of the land now known as Yarra. We also acknowledge the significant contributions made by other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to life in Yarra. We pay our respects to elders from all nations and to their elders past, present and future. Thank you very much for joining us for tonight's panel discussion, Choosing a Plant-Based Diet, Taking Climate Action Through the Food We Eat. Here in the City of Yarra, we recognise that the climate emergency presents an enormous challenge globally, regionally and locally as well. We understand that local government has a significant role to play in supporting our community in taking strong action on this issue. We know that the scale of transformation and change needed goes well beyond people making individual lifestyle changes. But at the same time, each and every one of us can play a part in helping to cut carbon emissions. Globally, about a quarter of our greenhouse gases come from food. This means that what we eat and where it comes from can have a very big impact on our carbon footprint. Red meat has by far the biggest carbon footprint of anything in our diets, almost 5 times the carbon footprint of chicken and up to 50 times the footprint of many locally grown fruit and vegetables. Of the 75 million tonnes of greenhouse gases produced by the agricultural sector in Australia each year, about 70% of this is methane produced by cows and sheep. This means about 10% of Australia's overall total emissions comes from cows and sheep. But methane emissions are just one part of the agricultural and greenhouse gas emissions story. Forests play a critical role in drawing down carbon from the atmosphere. Land clearing or deforestation, primarily in Queensland, is also responsible for about 10% of Australia's total greenhouse emissions. Nearly all of this land clearing is for beef production. In fact, 73% of land clearing in Queensland and 93% of land clearing in the Great Barrier Reef catchment area is related to beef production, which means that Australia has one of the highest rates of land clearing in the developed world, which is pretty depressing. So in short, the production and consumption of beef, lamb and dairy is greenhouse gas heavy. And while that doesn't mean that we have to go cold cold turkey, reducing our red meat consumption can have a dramatically positive impact on the planet. In tonight's discussion, we'll explore these issues in a little more detail and hear about what we can do to change the way we eat and take action on the climate emergency. We are very excited to have two very interesting, engaging, excellent speakers with us tonight. Speakers who may be well known to many in our audience, and speakers who will no doubt bring considered and insightful perspectives to tonight's topic, which is all about why we need to change the way we eat if we are to tackle the climate emergency. First up, Shannon Martinez is the owner and head chef at Smith & Daughters, Melbourne's best vegan restaurant. We are lucky to have right here in the centre of Yarra on Brunswick Street. She has been at the forefront of the plant-based eating movement in Melbourne and is credited with making vegan cooking and food more mainstream and even cool. Shannon has appeared on MasterChef, on the radio and in print, and has released several vegan cookbooks, including her most recent book, Vegan with Bite. In a nutshell, Shannon is the poster girl of plant-based dining.
Oh, well, that's bloody nice, isn't it? Sorry about my dog, by the way. I don't know what he's barking. I think he's found a bird.
Good stuff. Good on him.
Sorry.
We've also got Gemma Plesman joining us tonight. Gemma is a senior campaigner with the Wilderness Society. For the last 4 years, she has worked on a campaign to end deforestation in Queensland and around Australia. Before coming to the Wilderness Society, Gemma worked for the Australian Marine Conservation Society as Great Barrier Reef campaigner on the Fight for the Reef campaign, which was successful in stopping numerous coal port proposals along the reef and securing strong state and federal laws. Thank you for joining us, Shanna and Gemma. So exciting to have you here. I'll now hand over tonight's panel moderator, Eliza Coyle from Yarra Libraries.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sophie, and welcome Shannon and welcome Gemma, and I'm going to be the question person for tonight. And I thought we would kick it off straight to you, Shannon, if that's okay. Yeah?
Yes.
Let me have it.
Do it.
So, there seems to be a growing interest in plant-based eating. So we've got everyone from huge stars like Beyonce, Jay-Z, you know, we've got Venus Williams talking about the benefits of plant-based diet. And so you've been at the forefront of this shift. What do you think the main reasons are for people choosing to eat plant-based?
I think, you know, a massive part of why people see it differently now is because the way the media is representing, I think, plant-based diets. You know, I remember over 10 years ago when I first started focusing on vegan food, it was still thought of as a joke, you know, and you'd never see the word vegan in the newspaper, like never, ever, ever. You'd never see established beautiful restaurants offering vegan options. It just wasn't taken seriously. And I think like 10 years ago, maybe when you thought vegan food, you thought Hare Krishna restaurants, you know, that was your connection. It never was fine dining. It wasn't anything like that. You know, it wasn't cool. But all of a sudden, this shift started to sort of form. And I think the newspapers started picking up on people, like you said, like Beyonce becoming vegan, even if that was only for a month or whatever it was. But, you know, like things like that. And then the entire attitude and the tone that was used to describe vegan and plant-based food completely did like a 180. And now when you see things, you know, in the paper now, veganism or plant-based dining, they don't just focus on animal rights or animal welfare. It's environmental, it's health. There's so many different angles now. So I think people, if maybe the animal rights issue wasn't something at the forefront for you, the health issue might be. So I think people now, like, if you're choosing environmental, health, or animal, one of those is going to tick your box of what you are passionate about or what concerns you possibly. So I think it's kind of dragged people in, you know, and because vegan food has changed, you know, the way we do it at Smith & Daughters, the way people all around the world do, we've made it yum now. We've made it accessible for people. So it's no longer just your raw lasagna with zucchini slices or a lentil, you know, stack or something like that. It's
the iceberg lettuce with a tomato type of thing.
Exactly. You know, and it used to be boring. 90s vegan food wasn't that cool, man. But you know, now vegan food it's really exciting. So I think that's had a huge effect on people.
And so why did you do it? What was, like, tell us about, I read a piece on you where when you just started cooking, you realized you made this vegan dish and it just sold, and there was like this kind of people just, it's sold out every time.
Yeah.
So what
The
was like
Palmer.
the main deal for you when you started Smith and Daughters? What was your motivation?
Well, I mean, the reason why I did vegan food to start with, I've been cooking since the 90s. And, you know, I was working at the East Brunswick Club at the time at a pub.
That's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that was ages ago. Do you know, like I'm talking, oh God, 2004.
I love that though, like in the middle of a pub, you know, just the meal and I loved that. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I love pubs, you know, like if you can turn a pub, then you can turn anything
That's
vegan.
what I
felt, So I kept getting asked for vegan options and we didn't really have one on. And coming up through kitchens in the 90s, veganism wasn't a thing really. Vegetarian food, you know, you did your 12-hour, one-day session at TAFE, but there was definitely nothing about veganism. And the only allergy was peanut, you know, like gluten-free was not even an issue either. So people started asking me for vegan food and I literally had to really work on that and like look it up and focus on it. And I did a trip down to Footscray and I walked into Vincent's Vegetarian for the first time in my life and I could not believe what I saw, you know, a vegan lobster, a vegan chicken, like all these weird and crazy things, you know, and that to me just set off this like light bulb. I'm like, there are so many people out here that aren't being catered for in restaurants. And really, you know, what it comes down to as a chef is to cook food for our customers. You know, we're just a tradie at the end of the day. And I decided that I'd be the person to cook for those people who were not looked after. Absolutely. And then, you know, it went from a little test run to just going ballistic. And I guess, and, you know, now that's history now, like Smith and Daughters, Smith and Deli. I wasn't sure whether a fully vegan restaurant would be sustainable. I thought maybe, you know, I'd have to do veggie and vegan or something, but it's pretty amazing to watch the shift in the way people have started to eat now. Most of our customers aren't even vegan, you know, like they're same as me. You know, I eat vegan most of the time. So I think, you know, that's sort of the market that I'm really going for now. I'm trying, if I can get the masses to reduce that by eating our vegan food at the restaurant, you know, by cooking them things that are familiar, and that's the goal. Yeah,
amazing. And just one last question on that. Was the environmental aspect a consideration for you when you were with plant-based?
Environmental's that's a huge consideration for me, for sure. And you know, even down to like at the deli, we stopped getting a lot of products in that were imported because, you know, we were, to me, being a vegan product but also doing insane food miles doesn't really justify that product being any better than anything else in a way, you know. So being vegan isn't really enough. It had to also, the rest of it had to come along with it, you know. And so obviously all our produce at the restaurant and the deli is all extremely local. We're talking, you know, within 10, 15, 20, like really some of this is really close. And that's our real focus, is to shift to as close as possible.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to throw to Gemma now. I'm going to throw you a question as well. So thank you for joining us, Gemma. And
thanks for having me.
Thank you. In the recent ABC show, we did a series here at Yarra around it, and it was called Fight for Planet A. And we heard about deforestation or land clearing in Australia reaching globally significant levels, driven mostly by clearing for beef farming in Queensland. So we learned that we're the only developed country, which I was really shocked to hear, on a list of global deforestation hotspots. So we're around places like the Congo, the Amazon, Borneo, that are the worst for deforestation. So for those who didn't see the show and sort of don't have a background or any knowledge on the subject, could you give us like a bit of an overview about the connection between beef production, deforestation, and the sort of impacts this has on climate change, our forests, wildlife, that kind of thing?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And it's so great to be here, because I really appreciate listening to you, Shannon, and I love that, you know, if you can change a pub, you can change anything. And I've had some experiences in Central Queensland pubs asking for veggie food and offered the chicken or the fish option. So I love that. I guess the first thing I'd say in response to the question is, You know, Australia's forest and bushland is unique and globally significant. I think it's important to keep that front of mind, because we all have a responsibility, therefore, because so much of what is found in Australia's forests are found nowhere else on Earth. And at current rates, a football field sized area of forest and bushland is being bulldozed in Australia every 2 minutes. And it really shocks people to know that, compared with pre-European contact, just 50% of Australia's forest and bushland remains, and much of that, what is remaining, is broken into small, isolated, degraded patches. Now, if you can picture 2 bulldozers the size of your house, or, you know, large apartment, with a chain stretched between the 2, literally ramming through the countryside, taking out everything in its path. This practice became very common in Queensland in the last 50 years. And that is the state that bulldozes more forest and bushland than all other jurisdictions put together every single year.
Isn't that amazing?
And Queensland's deforestation rates, as you mentioned, have put Australia on the map of global deforestation hotspots, along with places like the Amazon. In Queensland, just between 2013 and 2018, 1.6 million hectares were bulldozed. And that's similar to an area the size of the MCG being bulldozed every 3 minutes. And as you can imagine, when forests are bulldozed, so much wildlife is killed instantly, and those that are left alive are homeless. They struggle to find places to go. You know, anyone who takes a cute photo of a koala up a telegraph pole or on a highway, that's because they've lost their homes, and so they're more vulnerable to car strikes, to dog attacks, to other animals. So deforestation has a big impact on wildlife, but also on climate, and that's what we're here to talk about. And climate change, because when trees are bulldozed, most of the trees in Queensland especially are piled up, and they're either left to rot or they're burnt, and that releases a lot of carbon into the atmosphere and greenhouse gas emissions. But obviously those trees can no longer act as a carbon store or to sequester carbon in the atmosphere. So it's, you know, trees are the best way for us to be drawing carbon out of the atmosphere, and we've got so much space in Australia to be doing that. But what we're seeing is, you know, right across the country. And in 2019, we conducted the first ever analysis in Queensland because of it being the greatest deforestation hotspot. And we found that 73% of deforestation is for beef production, the primary purpose for beef production.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so it's pretty mind-blowing. The scales are pretty boggling.
Particularly when you break it down and you're talking about, you know, the MCG, and you can get a complete understanding of how huge that is. You know, when you're talking in stats, sometimes it's sort of like, it's hard to imagine.
Yeah.
Even that's hard to imagine, even when you can, even when you know it's, you know, the size of the MCG. Huge. I'm like, but how is that possible? That we surely don't have enough space for that to be every 3 minutes. Like, but that's insane.
Yeah, it's a lot of trees. Yeah,
it's a lot of trees.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, equally a lot of wildlife. You know, scientists have estimated about 50 million animals killed in Queensland and New South Wales alone every year. And that's just, you know, that they're really estimates, and they know that they're conservative estimates. So
and it's funny that people were concerned about that with the bushfires. You know, when there was 50, you know, they were guessing how many animals were killed during the bushfires, and everyone was up in arms about that. Yet this is happening every year, and no one's even talking about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So Gemma, what kind of laws enable this to happen, and what can we do to change these, do you think?
Yeah, so most states have their own sort of vegetation management laws. In Queensland, it's called the Vegetation Management Act. And depending on the government of the day, those laws can change. And with the changes in regulation, we see dramatic escalation or dramatic decreases in clearing of native vegetation. In 2018, we secured new, stronger laws for vegetation, especially in reef catchments and remnant or old growth forest and bushland in Queensland. So that's one example of that was definitely a win, but we're waiting to see the data that will show us to what extent there's been a decrease. So that's at a state level, and each state will have their own way of protecting forest and bushland or allowing bushland to be bulldozed. But then at the federal level as well, and this is really important for everyone because we've all got a role to play therefore, no matter what state you're in. The federal government, at the federal level, there's an act called the Environmental Protection, Biodiversity and Conservation Act, the EPBC Act. And that is federal law that should protect matters of national environmental significance. So if there's a large area of bushland that's going to be bulldozed and it will have an impact on a nationally threatened species like the koala, like the greater glider, there's many of those threatened species right around the country in different places. If we know that there's an area that's going to be bulldozed, the federal government should pull that in and say, you need to go through a federal approval process. Okay. But what we've seen in Queensland is the majority of the bulldozing that happens is completely exempt from the state regulation, and very rarely does it get reined in by the federal laws.
Wow. Okay.
It's sort of out of sight, out of mind, and there's very little oversight. And so what we try and do at the Wilderness Society is wherever possible to point out examples where the federal government has a responsibility to act under the federal EPBC Act. And so we're trying to get changes and improvements at a federal level for them to strengthen that law and for them to start reining in more bushland where there is matters of threatened species, or where it is in a water catchment that flows into a Great Barrier Reef that's going to have an impact on something that is special to all of us. You know, just because it's happening in Queensland, it will affect all of us because it's Australia-wide. It's important at a national level. So yeah,
how do they manage to get away with it? Is it because there's so much money involved?
Because mostly at a state level, it is exempt, so it never gets put through any approval process. So I mean, a lot of sort of big planning and development, big coal mines, they have to go through very stringent state level approvals. They may still get ticked off, as we see quite often, but because they've gone through those state level approvals, they can then get sent to a federal approval process. And that's where we see them, at least some checks and balances put in place. Often they're very minimal, I will agree, but at least you've got some oversight, where what we've seen especially with beef production, is very rarely they go through, they're exempt, so at a state level, so they'll go ahead and rarely get pulled in at a federal level.
And so you're trying to change that at the Wilderness, like you're drawing attention to it and trying to get the law amended, is that?
Absolutely, and at the moment is a perfect opportunity for everyone around the country to take action on this. There's a review of the EPBC Act, which people may have heard about in the news. And if they haven't, I definitely recommend to check it out, because right now there is a 10-year statutory review of the federal EPBC Act, Environmental Protection, Biodiversity, Conservation Act. And that review is a once-in-a-decade opportunity. And the review, they had an independent panel, independent reviewer, Graham Samuels, and the review came back scathing, pointing out a lot of these issues and just saying it is not working, because every year our State of Environment report shows all indicators of environmental health are plummeting, and a major threatening process to both climate and biodiversity is habitat loss and land clearing. And we know that our federal laws need to be strengthened to ensure that there's proper oversight at a federal level. Of course, you know, the federal government right now is looking for lots of ways to overlook that review, because it was so scathing, and it pointed to many improvements that needed to be taken. And so it's a great opportunity right now to jump on the phone to federal members of parliament and say, hey, I heard about this review, and what are you doing about the review? Are you going to implement what they said? You don't even need to know anything about the review. Just ask them if they're doing what the scientists told them to do. They paid lots of money, taxpayers' money, to get that review done, and you know, we'd like to see it implemented.
So we're going to come back to that as well, because we want people to get out pens and things, and we're going to write things down, like how we can participate in that. So we'll just circle back to that at the end as well, for anyone at home who's not grabbed all that information. We're going to ask Gemma again to kind of just run through 3 things that we can all kind of do and sign up to.
Yeah.
But we'll move on to the next question, and this is for both of you. And just around, so we know we need to reduce carbon emissions because eating meat is embedded, but eating meat is embedded in our experiences, memories. We have a lot of associations with meat, family, friends, celebrations. So to be told that there is something with meat, something wrong with eating meat can feel really uncomfortable for people. So how do we shift people's deeply ingrained connection to a meat-based diet, do you think? And so maybe definitely Shannon, I'm sure you have some ideas about this because this is your drive. But just from both of you, what do you think about this?
You go for
Who's
it.
going to go first?
Who's gonna go first?
You go for it, Shannon.
I mean, yes. I think the only way to truly do it, I mean, humans are inherently extremely selfish beings, we don't want to go without if we don't have to. I think the only time the planet will go vegan is when we have no other choice. That I honestly think, because people are not willing to give up things they love. They're just not. So the only way I found the best way is obviously just through people's stomachs, right? Like if someone has their favorite dish in the world, say it's like an Aussie meat pie, for example, a 4 and 20 pie. Let's use that as if that's anyone's favorite food. But anyway, or maybe it is. If I say to them, if I can make you a pie as good as the real thing, would you swap? And they're like, yeah, of course, but you'll never make something as good. So when I give it to them, it's literally that simple for a lot of these things. But the only problem too that comes from that is being able to be accessible for people. So you go into Coles or whatever, and you can buy a tray of those sausages that you get at the Bunnings sausage sizzle, and it's 2 kilos worth of sausages for $5 or something like that, and there are people that can't afford to be selective about the food that they have. And, we have to be mindful of that. Eating vegan isn't the cheapest thing to do. It's not always an option. But reducing is what I'm really working at doing, obviously. So being able to provide people with things that they love and feel that they're not missing out, I think definitely is the key.
Yeah, I think that's I really love that. I love that you created these incredible foods that taste so good and so that people just want to get into it. And so I guess I don't have anything specifically to how to change people's mind. I think Shannon covered that so well, and I'm definitely no sort of psychologist, so I can't answer that question. But I guess I would say 2 things. That first, and I think you touched on it right at the start, Shannon, I actually honestly don't think we have time to change the minds of everyone who consumes animal products or meat products here and internationally. The time with the twin looming threats of climate change and biodiversity collapse globally, it's really clear that the change required is enormous, and it's so urgent. And I think if we do only focus on encouraging people in Australia to sort of sacrifice their steak, that's just actually 30% of the problem, because 70% of our beef, if we're talking about beef being the biggest contributor in Australia and internationally, 70% of our beef is actually exported internationally. However, the way that beef and other animal products is produced doesn't have to destroy ecosystems and the climate. In fact, there's a growing movement, as a lot of people know of farmers doing things really differently and regenerating instead of bulldozing, and looking for ways to make money out of protecting biodiversity. And so that goes to my second point, that we have enormous power as consumers, certainly purchasing products, and as Shannon mentioned, absolutely pushing Coles and Woolworths to make products cheaper that are healthier and better. Absolutely. That's one thing, but we have such a power. In 2019, we conducted the first ever corporate scorecard of Australia's beef industry, and we asked key companies how they were addressing deforestation risk in their supply chain. And our analysis found that none of the companies have sufficient policies or procedures in place to rule out deforestation in their supply chains. So while many companies are actually signed on to international agreements to say that they will rule out deforestation, no one has any way of implementing that in Australia. And because nobody is asking them about it, they're not bothering. Exactly. Yeah. So these corporations have huge market power. They've got money. They've got influence. They can change the entire supply chain if they ask for it. Yeah. And what influences them is you. They are terrified of their customers. They are terrified of the fake meat. They are, because they know that it's going to change their whole industry. And if we can demand better practices here in Australia, then deforestation-free beef could be one of those things that you could see on the shelf at Coles and Woolworths. And so while it is important to reduce our consumption absolutely in Australia, we can make it better so that internationally our beef that's getting exported is deforestation-free as well. So we don't have to change those minds overseas. Yeah.
I also think education is really important for the consumer in terms of how to cook things, right? I think until COVID, I was sure that hardly anyone cooked at home. But now we know that's not true. And now, while everyone's got the cooking bug, it'd be the perfect time to teach people more about how to cook and how to get the most out of a product. It's like, for all the vegan people listening, I'm sorry that there's all this talk about meat, but when you go to the big supermarkets, meat is so cheap. It's just so cheap. You can get chicken for $3.99 a kilo, and it doesn't even sort of cross your mind, because it's just, but you go to somewhere like Meatsmith, right, where the farms are small, they're local, ethical producers, and those things cost you 30 times more, and you can still get you can get multiple meals. Like, say we're talking about a chicken, for example. If you were to learn how to actually use that product in a better way, you can get 3 meals out of something by just understanding techniques, understanding recipes, jumping out of your comfort zone a little bit. So I think maybe, people learning actually how to cook things beside bangers and mash, the roast on a Sunday, fish and chips on Thursday. If we actually just branched out, so, maybe like councils and things providing cooking classes for communities, things like that, that could be something that would maybe be a great idea. So people could learn, all right, what can I do with $40 this week, and I can show you what you can do with that and how much you can get out of that money, instead of just this wasteful kind of shopping where it's just so cheap that we buy it and chuck it, don't even think about it.
Yeah Absolutely. We're doing a thing too, because a group of us, for anyone listening, went to Smith & Daughters, and now we're doing a cook-off, and we've got Shannon's book, and one of us is going to pick a recipe every week, and then we're going to kind of compare notes, so kind of making it, do you know what I mean? Like introducing kind of more complex like flavors into your diet as well can be really fun as well, I think.
Can I be the judge for that afterwards?
Yeah.
You have to send me photos.
We'll send photos, don't you worry. Sam, I was just going to check in with you and see if we have any questions before I ask a couple more questions from Shannon and Gemma.
Yeah, we've got a bunch of questions
I thought
coming
we
through.
Might. People are excited, yep.
So Ben is asking about the pathway to breaking Australia's love affair with meat, and we've been talking about that, but he's particularly wondering about mock meat and what's the role of that plant-based meat in I guess transitioning people from kind of a meat-based diet to a more plant-based diet. So what do you reckon, Shannon?
I think mock meat is that great in betweener, instead of just going cold turkey. I think if you've grown up with it, when you've been vegan or vegetarian for so long, you forget mouthfeel, you forget certain things. And I think if you've got someone who's, say, been eating meat for 40 plus years, straight onto the veg without anything else, it's going to be a big shock. And what we're trying to achieve here is a lovely, smooth transition into reduction. Not, that's why I get really pissed off when companies are just making a product for the sake of selling it because they see that vegan stuff is cool, and so they'll make, like I had an oat milk the other day that was so disgusting that I had to spit it out. Those products aren't doing anyone any favors. Like, if you finally get your granddad to finally not have milk in his tea and try oat milk for once, and that's what he gets, he'll be like, I told you it was disgusting. I knew it. I'm never trying it again. And I think, and I think that's a huge thing. So mock meats are a really great, it's almost like a gateway, you know, like a gateway drug to eating better. It's going to satiate you properly. If you have that shepherd's pie and you use like TVP, it's still going to feel familiar for you. It's not going to be new territory. Nothing's going to shock you. And then eventually things start changing. Your palate starts changing a little bit. You know, since I stopped drinking dairy, now when I taste it, it's so strong. And I remember when I used to drink it in my coffee, it was normal, right? But now when I have my coffee, it actually tastes like something's off in my coffee. So it's amazing how fast your palate can actually change.
Yeah, nice one.
Yeah.
So the next question comes from Joanna, and this, Joanne, and I'm already anticipating your answer, Shannon, because I think you might be able to give this person some good news. But she lives on the south side of Melbourne, and she cannot think of any vegetarian or vegan restaurants in her area. It's really hard to find what she considers healthy vegan or healthy vegetarian options that are tasty. So any top tips and how might she go about changing this in her local area?
Well,
Bum, bum.
funny you mentioned that. Joined on with the Overload Hotel, and I'm about to open the restaurant with them in South Yarra. It's on the corner of Chapel Street and Turag Road. But it's the first hotel in the world to go completely vegetarian, and they brought me in to run this kitchen. And so while there will be a few vegetarian options there, I'm going heavy as per usual on the vegan. I actually think that in terms of the menu, I've made everything vegan option. There's vegan for everything, and then there's a vegetarian option if you want to like add real cheese or something, but standard, because I kind of like that, you know. As a vegan, you go into a place and you switch out something for the vegan option, and you have to pay an extra $2 for like an extra $1 for soy milk or something. I want it to kind of be the other way around, you know. You want the real stuff, then you got to pay a little bit of money for it, you know, pay the tax. So you're in luck. I'll be over your way in like less than a month, babe.
Yeah, nice.
That's a great news story. Yeah,
Isn't
coming to
it?
you in South.
Yeah.
Vegan room service, like you just got more than the North has.
Have we got time for one more, Eliza? Can I sneak another?
Yeah, sneak
question
another
in?
one in, Sam. Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, do it.
So this one's from Alex, and it's for you, Gemma. And Alex is keen to know a little bit more about the Give Flake a Break campaign. He's curious about the amounts and types of fish consumed in Australia and what is fished locally and imported. So what can we do to help threatened shark species, and I guess any other threatened, you know, species of marine life as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. I used to work for the Australian Marine Conservation Society, but I'm not anymore, so I can't speak to current campaigns and things, but I know they do a sustainable seafood guide that they put out every year, every couple of years. I definitely encourage people to look at that if they're fish eaters, or give it to family if they know they are. It's so great. And I think you can actually get an app on your phone now.
I think it's Sustainable Seafood Week this week.
Oh, there we go.
Sustainable
Seafood Week.
But there'll be
So
heaps
definitely
online.
download that that guide and give it to your family for birthday presents. I think it's actually really powerful just to have the information. That's probably the first step to making a change, is having the information. Sorry, I can't speak to specific sort of campaigns that are happening at the moment, but I definitely recommend education is power at the moment. We are completely you know, fishing our oceans dry, and but you know, like I mentioned with beef, there are companies that are doing things in a really sustainable way, but you need to seek them out, and that's why getting the information is really important.
I can see that my my colleague Kel has popped a link in the chat function there. She said download the app, it's really good, and it's goodfish.org.au. Thanks heaps, Kelly.
And
Nice
I guess
one.
the last thing is asking, you know, if you've got a favorite restaurant that you go to, check with them as well. If they use it, if they know of it, if you've got a favorite shop that you go to, check with them. It's always, you know, you've got the power as the consumer, so ask the questions.
And start shopping at places like fishmongers, and you know, instead of Coles. God, like start supporting local small stores. The connection and the relationship you can develop with your greengrocer, with your fishmonger, they know everything, you know, like they're up to date with things. They'll steer you in the right direction. And I genuinely think that people honestly do want to make the right decision. They just don't know how. And even looking for it is a bit too much for some people, you know. So I think if it's put right in front of their face, like if they were to walk into their fishmonger and just like, what should I be eating this month? And they point in direction, they'll be like, yep, sweet, good, done. Do you know, it's really that easy, I think. So shopping local, you get that beautiful connection with the store that you don't get at a supermarket. So again, this is why shopping small and local is the way to go.
Yeah.
Sam, are we any more questions or?
There's heaps more, Eliza, but maybe do you want another couple, or why not?
Will we come back at the end, do you think, or?
I think we will come back into the end at the end. I might just get maybe one more sneaky one. Sorry, I'm, you know, being the question hog. This oh gosh, I can't even see who asked this question. I think Maria. So Shannon, Maria is wondering about how you get that really kind of creamy heartiness to vegan food. So many people would have eaten at your restaurant and not necessarily known that it's vegan. So how do you get that kind of creamy butter kind of, you know, that kind of,
that's a big thing with vegan
cooking
food.
hack.
Yeah, that's a really big thing with vegan food is mouthfeel. You have to understand that when you're actually removing animal proteins of any kind, a vegetable, a carrot, can't produce the feeling in your mouth that, say, a piece of cheese or dairy, you know, that it coats your mouth. It's like unctuous, right? And that's the sort of thing you crave. So, you know, when I'm making things, say like a Portuguese custard tart, you know, normally that would have lard in the pastry. That's why they're so flaky and so soft. Same with things like tamales or in stews. So I use a lot of vegetable shortenings and things. So if you think back to the time when you were little and you used to have school bake sales and you'd get chocolate crackles. So the kofa that your ma would have used to make chocolate crackles is just vegetable shortening. So things like that in your food. So if you add some of that, and you can use vegan butter as well, but just olive oil and some vegetable shortening, that vegetable shortening actually sits in your palate and coats it the same sort of way that animal proteins will do. So that's a really good way for it to carry the texture and the flavor. So
how did you work all of that? How did you work all of that out? Just kind of testing and eating and testing and eating.
So many mistakes. You know, more mistakes than successes, that's for sure. But I think, you know, that's why focusing on vegan food but not being strictly vegan is why my food is a bit different to other people's, is because I'm still understanding the things that the people I'm trying to convert into eating less animal products are going to be looking for or wanting, do you know? So definitely go for the kofa. And really it's just cheap coconut oil in a way, you know, like it's a processed coconut, it's coconut based. So don't worry about going to the health food store, just get kofa.
A bit of trial and error. Yeah,
exactly.
So over to you, Eliza.
So I think we've got two questions for each of you, just to give people sort of your top 3 tips, sort of that they can take home, put into practice, kind of really accessible actions. So for Gemma, I'll start with you. What 3 things can we as consumers do right now to reduce the emissions and environmental damage associated with the food we eat? And you might want to circle back, if you have a pen at home, get it out, or whatever. I'm old school, I've got a pen at home.
Me too.
That we can kind of probably the only one who has a pen at home. Good to hear. What we can do and sort of, places for people to go after this event.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing we can do as consumers is ask a question, and that has huge power. You know, we have meetings with Coles and Woolworths and things, and if they don't have consumers asking, then it doesn't even rate. We barely even get a meeting to talk to them about deforestation if they don't have anyone asking them about where's the deforestation-free beef. You know, that's how we've got free range eggs, on more shelves than caged eggs in Coles and Woolworths, is just people hassling them and hounding them. So that's the first thing. I think, ask questions. Look, even if you're not going in there to buy the beef, ask about, do you have a range of, where's the deforestation free?
Totally.
Do you know if this comes from? I mean, I'm sure a lot of you go to McDonald's all the time, but, that's one of those big fast food companies that has massive links to every single abattoir and section of Australia. And can you imagine if someone like them implemented their commitment that they have, international commitment and Australia-based commitment to rule out deforestation in the supply chain? Can you imagine the impact that would have on forest and bushland in Australia? And if they're getting hassled, they're going to get, you know, super scared. So I think that's the first question, is actually we need to start asking, do you know if there is koala habitat has been bulldozed to make these patties? Do you know, if a threatened species was killed in the making of this burger? Ask them if they know, and ask them how they know that information, because that's the key thing. They may say they've got a policy, but actually how are they implementing it? I can't stress that enough. Sorry, I know I've gone about that a lot, but that's the biggest
it's
thing,
good.
really,
And it's good to go, yeah, okay, ask questions, you know, if I go in there, anything I can ask questions about this from the people in the stores, everything. I think that's great.
Absolutely. And that does get back to them.
Too,
Email, exactly. Emails, anything that you like. Comment on Facebook, go onto their Facebook and send a message to their Facebook, and they'll, you know, and the more of a noise that we can be creating, the better around that. The second one, I guess, is with your politicians. As I mentioned before, there is a review right now of the federal Epbc Act. You can just remember the acronym, really. If you type in Epbc Act on Google, you'll get the whole thing. But there's a review of that at the moment, and as I mentioned, there is so much of the deforestation that occurs in Australia never even gets a look in from the federal government, even though they have a responsibility to protect matters of national environmental significance. Because there's a review happening right now, it's important that we make sure that as taxpayers, the money we spent on that independent review actually gets implemented. And we can ask our state, we can send an email, find out who is my federal member of parliament, and find out who they are, and then give them a call to their office or send them an email and just say, hey, I heard there's a review of something called the Epbc Act. Is that going to be implemented? Are you going to be implementing that in full? And ask those questions. Even if you don't know the facts, that's fine. You can find out more, if you like, on our website, wilderness.org.au. There's information there about new nature laws, which is what we need. We actually need national environmental laws that actually protect threatened species, because Australia is number 1 in the world for mammal extinction and number 2 in the world for biodiversity loss. And that's what a result of our federal environment laws. So get in there, talk to your federal member of parliament, send that message as well to the federal environment minister. So I'm only up to number 2.
So we go to this website and then we find these emails and these numbers.
Sorry, so if you want to find out who your federal member of parliament is, just type on Google, who is my member of parliament? And that you'll find a website where you can put in your postcode if you don't know who your member of parliament is. They're the person that's elected in your federal seat, and they are supposed to represent your views. But a lot of us don't actually know who our federal member of parliament is. So it's hard for them to represent your views if we don't know who they are. So have a chat to them, pick up the phone. They'll roll over like puppies if you call them. They're so nice to you because they know that we elect them or not. Sorry, maybe not roll over like puppies. Sorry, Sophie, you're actually apologies.
No offense taken.
Puppies are cute.
Do it.
I meant that they'll be very nice.
Cute, I love that.
I meant that they'll be very nice to you. Anyway, so my point is, find out who they are, ask them about federal environment laws that are up for review at the moment. But like I said, jump onto our website, wilderness.org.au. Yes. And the third one, definitely reducing our intake, but at the same time, we've got to be putting pressure on corporations, like I said, who have an impact right across the country and internationally.
Awesome. Amazing. Top 3. I've written them all down. And I'll turn to Shannon. With plant-based cooking in the past has received a bit of a bad rap for being boring and bland. What would be I was also going to say it was an understatement, but it was good. Came from you. Would you be top 3 tips, ideas, or advice for cooking plant-based meals at home?
Okay, so plant-based meals to help convert or change minds of, for sure, is don't think of it as new style of cooking. Think about it the same way as you would normally make your dinner, but just start learning slowly, little substitutions. So, I mean, you know, there's nothing wrong if you're the family that does the thing, like I said, and fish and chips on Thursday and roast on Sunday and whatever. But all those meals, like, there's pretty much nothing that I haven't made vegan versions of. You know, we have customers come in all the time saying, you know, my grandmother used to make the most amazing beef bourguignon pie or something like that, and I would love it if I could try it again. So think of the favorite things that you love, lasagnas, whatever. Grab some stuff online. Like, there's heaps of, you don't even have to buy books. There's so much information online.
You can hire the books from the library, obviously.
Hire the books from the library. You don't have to go and buying books.
Don't have to buy anything.
No, you don't buy anything. Go to the library, you know, and just use the techniques that you've used your whole life. I know it sounds kind of scary because it is really easy to rely on meat. You know, like if you're having a dinner, you cook a steak and then you just put a salad with it. But what happens when you take the steak away? And then people are like, am I just going to eat salad for dinner? And I think that's kind of where that joke, like, well, you just eat salad or just eat grass. Like, it's cooking with meat is really easy. It's really easy. Cooking vegan food takes a little bit more creativity, but once you get into the hang of it, it's super easy. So I would say maybe try for a week. You know, once you finally finish that dairy-based yogurt in your fridge, the next carton, get a non-dairy one and make that just a little change in your home fridge, you know. And then when you're out, maybe instead of getting the beef mince, get the vegan mince, but use it exactly the same way. So your whole fridge doesn't look different. Because I could imagine if you went home one day and you're like, that's it, I've changed what I ate, and you just you just cleared every shelf and you put everything in there that was new, and, you know, and nothing was recognizable, it would be super overwhelming, I think, and not realistic. So I think slowly, maybe pick 1 or 2 items a week and just start replacing them in the fridge and just see, maybe not all of them are going to work. And there's no shame or nothing wrong with not liking something, you know, but if you're making an effort and making small substitutions here and there, that's going to grow into a really big change within just your household. And, you know, if we can, maybe we can, like, in a dream world, imagine if we could change meat-free Mondays into meat Mondays, and then 6 days a week everyone's vegetarian or vegan, and then on the 1 day a week is when it's like a special occasion. We take meat for granted. It's just like, it's like picking up an apple now for people, you know. And I think it needs to, the idea of it needs to change, and we need to respect it more as an ingredient and use it as a highlight, not as a main focus of a meal.
Yep. So small transitions.
Bit by bit,
and trial and error with cooking, and also what your new favorite kind of products are as well. So, you know, try this vegan yogurt, try that one and see. Yeah,
and don't get scared after one, because there are a lot of shitty products out there, same as there are a lot of shitty non-vegan products out there. So don't just give it one shot. Like, try one, maybe look up some reviews, you know. There's one thing vegans love to do, it's talk about food. So if you go on any vegan Facebook, they'll all tell you, we've tried this new yogurt and it's terrible, or it's the best one out. And then, you know, you can base it off that if you want to. But yeah, don't just say no after one bad experience, because no one can tell me they haven't had a bad experience eating non-vegan food. So give it a chance.
Yeah, no, well, I was sharing at dinner when we were at your place about, I've got a grandmother, my beautiful grandmother is mid-80s, and she's become vegetarian as well. And so it's never too late. And she's working out the whole, how are we going to do this? How's the conversion of the cooking going from, you know, the lettuce and the tomato to something more complex? Like, because like particularly your diet at that age is really important. So yeah, unbelievable. Yeah, I love people it. You can always do it. Yeah.
They're hard to change minds of people that age. So that is good. I don't think
so, you know, just as a benchmark, if you're under 86,
she's killing it. Good,
killing it. Go for it. Okay, Sam, do we want to flick back to you? I'm not sure if Gemma needs to go, but do we have any more questions, Sam?
Yeah, we do have some questions.
Okay, so that's my question. That's my question.
Cool. So we've got the question around, Shannon, you were talking earlier about, you know, the 4 and 20 pie, and you know, people love their kind of, I guess, like footy food or easy kind of going on a picnic food. Do you have any plans to bring out kind of like the vegan version of all those things that we're going to be able to eat at the footy one day?
Oh, mate, I would love to. I mean, I already do all those things anyway at the deli. We always sell we call it the 420 pie. you know, and we do the egg and bacon Martinez, you know, we do
That's awesome.
Nice.
you know, because we got, you know, all the tradies that are around the area, and they still come in. We call it the high vis special. They come in for either their pie and their sausage roll, their flavored milk, and their donut, and it's all vegan, you know. So like, you're not missing out on anything. So if anyone out there has a beautiful manufacturing plant that I could make this on a large scale, I'd be very appreciative, because I would love to have Smith and Deli vegan meat pies at the footy, because that would be
That would be amazing.
That would be the best.
That would
wouldn't
be
it?
so good.
Yeah,
I
mean,
would
there's nothing
love
wrong
that.
with just eating chips, but I mean, if you could get a pie as well, that'd be pretty sweet.
Oh, it'd be great. Imagine going to the AFLW, having
Hey.
a pie.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it'd
See?
be great. It'd be so great.
Love it.
Any top tips about vegan shopping? You know, so you know, where's a good place to go shopping and find some of these products that you're talking about?
When we first opened the deli, what I wanted to actually bring in was products that people probably wouldn't have thought were vegan, because they just didn't think it would be vegan. But so many things are actually vegan, you know. So you don't need to go to a specialty store, or like there's no, especially now. I mean, back in the day, you kind of, if you want to mock meats and things, you definitely probably had to source them out. But you go to the major supermarkets now, or to even local providors and things like that, and it's amazing how fast it's just kind of coming in. I guess because, again, you know, people ask for it all the time. So you've got places, you know, like My Deli or like Cruelty Free Shop, places like that that's focused solely on vegetarian and vegan food. But just take some. I love food shopping more than any other shopping, you know. So I go to places like Mediterranean Wholesaler, and I just spend an hour and a half in there, and I got headphones in, put Gypsy Kings on, and I'm just like with my trolley, it's like checking out everything, and you'll be surprised, you know, how many things are actually vegan. So just go anywhere, shop in beautiful small stores, talk to the owners. That's what I'd recommend. I just recommend staying away from the big two if you can.
Yeah, yeah. That sounds like a good life rule, doesn't it? Stay away.
Yeah, and especially in Yarra. I mean, like between Collingwood, Fitzroy, like just between those two, you can literally get every single thing you could possibly want. You know, around Abbotsford area, everything is there. There's no need to go there.
Can I ask one sneaky question, which is my own question, which maybe isn't so good? But anyway, I want to chuck it in. So the other night we had the most delicious food generally, but we had the most delicious chicken dish, and so I haven't eaten real chicken, I reckon, for 20 years or so. But the chicken with, I think it had
in the
skewers? Green. No, like it was sliced, and it had like a green, like, or maybe like a parsley kind of sauce. Yeah, and a yogurt.
Yeah. So that's gluten based, that one.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's
multiple. How do you make that?
How do you do it?
Yeah.
You're basically making doughs. It's pretty crazy, huh? Yeah, you're making dough. So mock means like seitan. So you know what they call seitan is a gluten-based product. So the old way of making seitan. So again, ways that you can do things cheap. You can make seitan with regular flour. So nowadays, because we're all lazy and need things done really fast, there's a thing called Vital Wheat gluten that people use to make seitan, which is like pretty much pure gluten flour. But back in the day, I'm talking hundreds of years ago, when, you know, in Buddhism and things, they make a lot of these mock meats. They made seitan out of regular flour that's washed. So you would literally make a dough, flour and water, make a dough with it, put it in a bowl in the sink and cover it with water, and you literally wash the dough, and you'll see the starch go into the water and wash out until the water runs clear. And what you're left with is this really weird, almost like a brain looking kind of product, and that's pure gluten, which is super high in protein, really good for you unless you're a celiac, then it's really bad for you. You know, and then you can turn that into so many different meats, and that's what that chicken's made of. And you use that as a base, and then you flavor it and you can color it. Like, you know, for ham at the deli, we use beetroot to get that beautiful pink sort of color that you'd expect from ham. In chicken, you know, it's just depending on the meat you're creating, you just change the flavors. So you can make it. It's pretty easy.
It was so out of this world delicious.
Amazing.
Yeah, I haven't stopped thinking about the whole meal, but especially that. Like, I mean, I love food too, but I've hardly been able to concentrate since going to dinner the other night. I've thought about it so much. It's delicious.
I wish more people told me that.
So I won't hog any more time with questions. And I know that we're right on our finish time of 8:15, and I know that Gemma needs to push off, but I might just pass over to Sophie again to just, I guess, offer a few closing comments, and we can hear Cyrus in the background, Shannon's dog, with his squeaky toy. He's having a few last words as well. But yeah, over to you, Sophie, just to, I guess, wrap things up and send us on our way.
Sure thing. Thanks, Sam. Thank you so much, Shannon and Gemma. It's just been an excellent session. I've been reducing my meat and dairy intake over years, but I just feel like this has really inspired me to go further with that. You've really brought home why we need to change the way we eat if we want to take action on climate change. A few standouts for me were, Shannon, your description of convincing the masses, I think, is really worthwhile, and how, if you want to do that, you've got to kind of convince people they're not missing out.
Right.
I wanted to add one tip to both of yours, which might be, if you've got a family member that you're trying to convince that it's a good idea to eat a bit less meat and vegan food can be good, maybe you should head on down to Brunswick Street or the New South Yarra location and try out one of Shannon's restaurants.
Exactly. Or cook for them and don't
help you sell it.
Yeah.
I also like the idea of paying the tax, where you pay for dairy swaps in or meat swaps in. I love it if more places did that.
Right, be good.
So good. Gemma, your point, I think, about, well, all of your points were really good. I'm keen to be looking up the Epbc Act myself and contacting the people you've mentioned. I just wanted to say, on that note, like, really do reach out to people. We'd love to hear from members of the community. I'm at the very local level, but I'm sure that's true of state and federal as well. And often, even if we believe something, it's hard for us to get it over the line without that community backing. So if we've got people reaching out to us saying, hey, we want you to take this step in the climate emergency, it makes it easier for us to do it. We've also got another session coming up, which focuses on tips, techniques, and advice about eating more plants, featuring the well-known cook and author Alice Zaslavsky, or Alice in Frames.
He's the best.
Excellent. Happening on the 21st of April on a Wednesday. You can find out more about this event and register on the Yarra website or emailing climateenergency@yarracity.vic.gov.au. We've also got a community skills for climate action program coming up that some of Gemma's comments really made me think that could be good for some people on the line. Just, search Yarra City and Yarra City training climate, and it'll come up. And that might be a great way to get more engaged and involved in transitioning some of these companies along the path that we want them to take. Thank you, Shannon, Gemma. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in tonight. We appreciate you all spending your evening with us. Good night.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Wonderful evening.